Hey everyone, welcome to episode 5327 of SDRescue. I'm once again joined by Grayson Fulbright, email copywriter extraordinaire and overall wonderful person. Today we're going to be looking at breakup emails. Should you do them? Should you not? How do you do them right? How do you do them wrong? We'll answer all those questions here. We've got a really great one coming up. Grayson, how are you?
I'm really excited. Yeah, for those who are not off for Columbus Day, which is the holiday today, I'm really glad that you guys got to join us. We're going to be hopping into, like Austin said, this idea of a breakup email, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's generally an email designed towards the end of a cadence to try to shift the power from the buyer to the seller and really put an ultimatum on the line that says, hey, are you going to talk to me, or is this something that I need to close out and forget about? So there are a lot of people who use these. There are also people who don't agree with them and don't think that they're effective. So I think it'll be interesting to get thoughts both from myself, who, I tend to be on the selling side, always trying to write the messaging, and then also getting feedback from Austin, who is, often a buyer and has a lot of experiences as someone that goes through the sales process for companies, or at least receives a lot of cold messages.
All right, let's jump right in to the email here. Let's get this screen shared. Perfect. All right, so here we go. I'll just take it away. Hi, Austin. I think it's time to part ways for now. Either this simply doesn't interest you at all, or I completely dropped the ball on expressing the value here. I'd like to try one last thing. If you share with me what your average deal size is, or approximately, I can quickly show you how much revenue you're missing out on by not leveraging identity resolution technology. Is that fair? All right. Let's go look down at the beautiful color codes we have here. Now, our classic orange and blue complementary colors. Lots of there is so this is a pretty classic breakup formula where they go, hi, I'm going to leave you alone. Either you're not interested, or I failed, it's my fault, I didn't express value, it's not a pity party, but it's like, I wish it felt more genuine. That's kind of where I'm at, where I'm like, okay, yeah, you don't need to acknowledge that you failed to express value. The lack of my reply is more than enough of an acknowledgement that you failed to express value. But he does say, hey, I'd like to try one last thing, one last Hail Mary to see if this is valuable. Hey, if you give me something, I can tell you how much revenue you're missing out on. What are you losing by not using my stuff? Is that fair?
No, it's not.
I don't know. There's a lot of ask and not a lot of give. I don't know how fair that is.
Yeah, I think so. To kind of go back to the balance in power between a buyer and a seller, I think it's worthwhile talking about that when we review this email, because buyers, when they don't respond, make sellers feel helpless, because their job is to connect with them and to engage with them and to not only get in contact with them, but to actually be relevant enough to move something along. So it's totally discouraging when someone either ghosts or just straight up doesn't interact with any of your outreach. And so this is kind of an attempt to take on this illusion of authority and of importance, and also kind of frame the outreach and the conversation as something that's scarce. Which can work. I think there's a lot of elements in a breakup email that there's a reason why it can work. It's because it gives these illusions to the buyer that, oh, wait a minute, I haven't been paying attention to this brand, and all of a sudden they've abruptly kind of changed the pattern and they've decided to actually reject me. While that can be risky, there are definitely some buyers, and I think definitely some industries where that can work very effectively. However, I want to go back to some points that I bring up almost every episode, that it's very hard to get buyers to actually care enough to do something like that if the entire message is kind of based on assumptions and also kind of based on things that you want and what you want to talk about. And so I think there are ways that this person, I think, could have changed at least the perspective of the email. Instead of saying, I think it's time and I'd like to try one last thing, maybe make it more conversational rather than it almost arriving in letter form in a mailbox and there's nothing the buyer can do. The breakup has already happened. Instead, my big picture advice here would be, if you are going to do some sort of ultimatum that breaks the relationship off unless they decide to respond or do something, at the very least, be very specific to them and try to be compelling to them rather than making it all about you. Because what that'll often do is just piss people off. And whether they were in market or not, they might read this email and be like, well, okay, if you're going to be a grumpy boy, I'll just mark you in spam, like moving on, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing about this email is that it comes off. So there's a couple of things that I talk about with salespeople now. I'm not a big proponent of like this idea that, you know, salespeople should always be about credibility and I'm so credible, but I do think that salespeople should project in the way they communicate and the way they interact with buyers that their time and their product is valuable. And this level of this message particularly, and it's really easy to, again, like, I just want to frame, this is why we rewrite these, because it's really easy to just only be critical and be overly critical. Oh man, Google Drive's trash is changing. Let's dismiss that. What I want to say about this is that nothing lowers your status more than begging, right? This is a well-written grovel. Don't grovel. There's something primal in my brain that when somebody is needy, it fires off these receptors to run away from this thing because it obviously doesn't know how to survive in the wild. You know, like, this thing needs me. Get off. Go away. I don't have resources to feed the needy. Not saying I'm not generous, but I'm saying, like, if you approach me with this type of message, you're already sending signals that you're desperate, right? And desperate sellers, not desperate buyers. Desperate sellers don't win deals. Desperate sellers lose deals. So that's my first problem, like, philosophically about this email. You know, another couple of things that you said is there's a lot of ask for not a lot in return. Basically, and like I kind of hinted at in the way I sarcastically summarized their email, is that they're asking me to give them information about myself and the account in order to build leverage to pitch me. And it's just too late. By the way, first thing I do want to say about this, that Grayson, it's not fair because Grayson doesn't get all these emails. And like, a lot of these emails are sent to me. This email is sent as like number 4. Yeah. Really? This is like the 3rd or 4th email in the sequence. That's it. There's not that many emails. First of all, I do want to say that I forgot about that. Is when I was reading this email, I was like, oh yeah, this email, and I went back and I was like, oh yeah, this guy only sent me like 3 or 4 emails. And this is the 4th one. So guys, guys, girls, everyone, all salespeople, don't give up. Like, just because you've sent 3 emails that weren't valuable doesn't mean that. The problem is I think so many SDR, so partially is management and unrealistic expectations, and, you know, and also you're getting taught wrong things. But like, just because, you know, 1 to 3 emails hasn't found something that, you know, just because your cookie cutter ideal customer profile in your, you know, training and onboarding PowerPoint slides aren't resonating with me, that just means you have to do more work to try and evolve the message a little more, right? Don't send this on email 4. I mean, most people won't. I realize that in practice, this is probably an email number 8 or 12 or 16 or something, you know, touch 8, 16, 12, something. It's an end of the sequence thing. But this was email 4. So first of all, don't do that. And second of all, if you've sent 14 emails or 12 emails, well, maybe not emails, but touches, and you haven't found something that resonates, you got to reevaluate. Like, you know, it really, I mean, maybe you're pulling out all the stops, but a lot of times what I see with SDRs and sellers is that they not only do they're just trying to make slight iterations on the same message. It's not actually a different angle or a different point of value. They really only have one to three value propositions or like ways they feel like they benefit a customer. And they just repackage that same thing 8 different ways and send it out. And really they're only hitting on 1 to 2 points and wondering why people aren't responding.
Yeah, I personally don't really agree with using breakup emails, especially for, you know, larger deal sizes and working with markets that, you know, aren't just like overflowing with people to talk to. I think it's very dangerous to do it. And I think you made a really good point, Austin, about the fact that, you know, this is only email 3 or 4 when you received it. I think people need to understand that sales is a timing game. If you're targeting the right buyers, I mean, even if you mess up a couple of times and you send some bad messages, like if you stay in touch and you can stay on their radar, eventually they will come in market. And if you play your cards right and you have a good value prop, you can get in front of them and you can get a meeting. But I think a lot of SDRs, they're trained with this type of perspective where it's like they focus on the first few touches, you know, touch 1, touch 2, touch 3. And then a lot of them are trained to just exit the deal like ASAP if there's no traction. Like unless they're just chomping at the bitch in market, ready to go, that they're taught to just kind of like, okay, like let that one die. When instead, like that's when you need to be really moving in to different outreach, like you said. If direct sales outreach, trying to get a meeting or send an overview or start a sales conversation is not working, you need to try different types of value adds. Rather than just trying to start a sales conversation, maybe it's sending a link to a blog post or sharing access to a webinar or something else that can leave value to them and make them feel like you care about them, even if they're not in market immediately. And so I think this email is a good example of often, like you said, Austin, giving up on deals too quickly and not understanding the timing behind a lot of buyers and their buying cycles. I think if you're going to use a breakup style email where you're trying to at least distance yourself from the buyer and give them some time before you re-engage them, I would focus on leaving a good lasting impression. Focus on leaving them something to think about rather than making it this awkward social situation to where they look at the inbox, they see the confrontation, they read it, and all of a sudden it's this weird situation where a seller who's been bothering them all of a sudden is trying to, like you said, almost use pity to kind of like force them into a conversation or at least into responding. And we talked about this earlier, you know, any response is a good response if it's done well. These types of emails, I think, is where you can get onto the wrong side of that and start killing relationships because the way that you speak, the way that you frame the relationship can often frustrate people. And then in the future, it's harder to connect with them. So that's my personal thoughts about the breakup email. I would say that it can definitely be useful. It can definitely be useful as well if you have high volumes of activity and many conversations and you just can't nurture them all. But in general, why would you want to cut the tie? Why would you want to just leave them feeling like you gave up? If I was in your space and you were sending these, I would personally change the last step of my cadence to be like, I'm not giving up on you. I'll follow up in 2 weeks with something super valuable for you to look at. And that's going to stick out much more than something like this, which is basically like, I'm giving up, but here's one last ditch effort to see if you'll pay attention to me.
Yeah, and you actually make an interesting point, which gives me an idea for something. I'll get to a little bit in the rewrite, but I just want for all of the managers out there, directors, VPs, CROs, if you have this as a step in the cadence, in the sequence, right? If you want people, this is aimed at one type of buyer and one type of buyer only. So you have to look at the way if your sequence is written to only harvest the low-hanging fruit, you're probably not a market leader in your space, right? Because you're getting beat by the market leaders in the long game. Market leaders have sequences that are tailored to open the doors and keep those doors open and evolve and the way you become a market leader is you have a pipeline of people not in market that you're moving to in market, and once they get to in market, you're top of mind, right? Where you aren't, if you're a bottom feeder if you're constantly competing. You don't get to be a market leader by competing all the time and just always being better. The problem is that a lot of people who aren't market leaders don't think far enough ahead in the long game, and they write sequences like this that have 1 to 2 value props and then are just trying to grab people in market, and if they're not in market, breakup email. So if that's your strategy, and that's how, and look, you're gonna have to have some candid conversations and look in the mirror and be like, oh, is that who are those the type of customers we're onboarding? Do they give us more problems? Is there somebody that said, hey, I heard about you 6 months ago and I wasn't interested, but then I bought 6, 8, 12, 24 months later? Those are the story. Those are indications that you have a good buying process, that you are on the way to be a market leader or are a market leader. You're not a market leader if somebody's like, if you're getting people to respond to these types of emails and they are, and you're only getting people who are currently in market. Like, you just can't become market leaders if you're only grabbing low hanging fruit. There's just not enough low hanging fruit to go around, especially in the technology space. No, unless it's very niche, very, very niche, there's just not enough low hanging fruit to go around. So that's all I want to say from a leadership and strategy perspective. We can move into the rewrite now.
Cool. Yeah. Just a quick point on that. I wanted to say that you make total sense, and I wanted to mention that when you're looking at in-market buyers, I mean, even if they are in market, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to actually connect with them. And so there's so many variables going on here, and I would just say, like, not only are in-market buyers more competitive because there are more people reaching out to them, but that's also going to be, I think, where people put their guns forward the hardest. So not only are there more people targeting in-market buyers, the best of the best messaging is going to be focused on those people that every brand in the space knows is ready to buy. And so I think you made a good point. You got to be very, very careful about just tailoring your messaging to the most in-market, ready to talk buyers out there, because that's really hard. And it takes your messaging on this weird journey that kind of goes away from the remainder of the market that could talk to you and would love to become a qualified buyer in the future, but they're not in market yet. They need to learn more, need to have some compelling event take place or some compelling information to be shared. So I just keep that in mind. The more and more you tailor messaging to in-market buyers, the harder it is to make that messaging relevant to everyone else. And in the meantime, in-market buyers are just going to be more and more competitive. Every new competitor that pops up.
Agreed. The rewrite. Here we go. Hi, Austin. Does Nuarx have a way to spot new chances to generate revenue within the customer lifecycle? It's a good question, by the way. I'll get to that. Customer data is often hard to find, incomplete, or inaccurate, which causes a lot of brands to miss out on winnable deals because they lack visibility and access to critical information. I'm reaching out to showcase how our company can unearth more chances to generate revenue, improve conversion rates throughout the customer lifecycle, and maximize lifetime value with identity resolution. Can I share more, or is this not a good time to connect? Well done. Well played. So this would be a great email to send. You and I are on the same page as far as like breakup emails of like, closing the door, cutting ties, being like, hey, I'm going to leave you alone, whatever. I do want to say something that what you said was actually really money there. If you do have to send a breakup email, if your management, for all of the, individual contributors out there, if your management says, hey, you got to send a breakup email, I would much rather receive a breakup email that says, hey, look, it seems like I messed up. Either I messed up, you can even take the Beck Holland, right? Beck Holland is kind of the one who flagshipped this approach, and it's in the Agoji sequence too, but the like fall on your own sword, it's my fault, sorry for not giving value. The problem is all of you do it now, so it's so unoriginal, right? I'm so tired of all of you admitting to me that you didn't provide value earlier in the sequence. Just understand that you're not providing value because I'm not replying, and then go and find value and provide it. Stop telling me you didn't provide value. I don't care that you didn't. I'm sorry you didn't. Go cry to your manager. Just go and get value and bring it back. Bring me some value. But and that's Beck Holland's thing, and that was cool. That was put out, but it's way overused now. I would love to just hear a thing where it says, hey, even if you just ignore the value thing and just say, hey, look, it doesn't seem like it's the right time right now. I'm going to go back. I'm going to come back in about 2 months. I'll follow up and see if there's something new that, might be valuable to you then. Give yourself an in to go and bring value 2 months later, a month later, whatever your time frame is. I don't care. I think, what you said earlier when we were talking about the original email up above was money. I was like, oh man, that's a good line. Like if I have a territory, because a lot of you SDRs out there are gonna have a territory, right? And there's only so many accounts. So you don't want to say, hey, I don't want to talk to you ever again. Goodbye, break up, or reply to me. I'm closing your file. File's shut. Don't talk to me, dude. There's only your territory is only so big. And if you're at a big company and you have a small territory, you're like, I don't want to break up with anyone in my territory. But first off, with this rewrite, great question, right? The question's awesome. If I answer no to that question, I already have to rethink as a buyer. I'm rethinking how we do business. Oh, we don't actually. There's no way we're spotting new chances to generate revenue in our customer lifecycle. We're not looking at that. See, now you've reframed me. You've reframed because the problem is a lot of people just like throw darts at problems, or they just value prop buyers to death. What you want to do is get people to think about how they do business and rethink how they do business. Because normally in the framework of them doing business, your solution doesn't fit. They would have bought it already, right? So now you have me rethinking how I'm doing business. Oh, we don't do that. That's an interesting conundrum. We don't do that. Should we? And then, then you give me the problem. Well, here's why. It's often hard to find, incomplete, or inaccurate. And then I remember, oh yeah, I remember. It's because I don't want to pay $40,000 a year for Clearbit, or whatever, to pull the data in, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I don't like this, or oh yeah, we are missing out on deals. Hey, I can show you how we can do that with identity resolution. Can I share more? Or is now not a good time to connect, right? Most of the time, everyone and sales managers sales management won't like this. Directors won't like this. VP, CROs, investors won't like this. But guess what? Most of the time you lose deals is because it's not the right time inside their company. There is more out of your control than sales management is willing to admit. As a sales manager, most mainstream sales management hasn't caught up to that yet. And so the way you leave the out is good. Oh, it's not a good time. Cool. So, and I loved the idea that, you could specify the time frame. You mentioned that above, like, hey, can I reach out in 2 weeks and see if I can find something that's more relevant to you? I think that's an awesome way to end it. But the formula for this email is very compelling. I would even say as a breakup email, it's absolutely terrible because you didn't close my file. But dude, it's so good that I would put it earlier in the sequence. Like, it's that good. Like, because at the end it's a little bit of a push-pull, right? Like, hey, can I share more, or is it now not a good time to connect? Like, give them an out, right? I think giving them an out is really a really good thing to do, and it makes me rethink how I'm doing business. If I don't have it, most people, like I said, try to just shove their way into how the customer does business. We accelerate customer life cycle, blah blah blah, ROI metrics stuff. They just shove. All you have to do is get the prospect to question how they're doing things now and help them see how they could do it differently. And then they'll talk to you. Because then they're like, oh yeah, that's something I haven't considered. Maybe I should talk to you.
Yeah, I agree. And I didn't want to start on the CTA this time and kind of go backwards, because I do recognize that I didn't know that it was step 3 or step 4 in the cadence, but I recognize that it was a breakup email, which is generally later in the sequence when presumably they haven't engaged or really done anything that, gives SDRs a reason to prioritize them or give them a call. But I wanted to show everyone watching kind of a different way to kind of do an end email. And I think Austin nailed it on the head. When I tend to do emails later in the step, in later steps in a cadence, I kind of transition my focus, kind of like the next steps that I'm expecting the buyer to take based on what step they are in the sequence. So, step 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the steps where you're going to expect to get all of the easy hanging fruit, all of the hot, ready to go buyers. And so those will be more direct, right? You want to get on a call, you want to give them a demo. But as you move further along, you have to kind of understand the type of audience you're dealing with. Because if you're sending a fifth and a sixth and a seventh email to a group of 100 people, that's very, very different, I think, than sending emails 1, 2, and 3. And so you need to kind of change your perspective on what you actually want out of emails later in the sequence. And me personally, I shift to two things: either trying to get information to qualify, specific information, using things like questions to kind of get people that have specific problems to raise their hand. Or two, I try to just add value, which is what you'll tend to see in, remarketing sequences and nurture sequences. Is it's less focused on direct sales. We're not trying to ask for your time. It's just, can I send a case study? Can I, share a link to a blog? Can I invite you to my webinar? And I much rather would prefer using those levers than trying to do like an ultimatum breakup email. And so that's why when I organized my CTA like that, I wanted to give them an out. It's not always a good idea to say, or is now not a good time, or would it be better to follow up later? That's risky because it gives people an out. But later in the sequence, that's totally okay. Because like we've discussed before, any response is a good response if you're talking to the right people and getting the right people to respond. So I'm hoping with this messaging, I'm not pissing anyone off. I'm hoping with this messaging that whether or not someone agrees with me, this is going to get them to A, understand me much better in terms of how I can help them and what my brand does. And B, ideally, it gets them to at least take an action. If they tell me no and it's not the right time, perfect. Okay, that answered my question for me. Everything's good. It's much better than them going on to the next step and still not responding, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what people need to recognize that people are not. And as SDRs, it's really hard because typically it's your first job out of college, first sales job, even a lot of times. And even if it isn't your first sales job, the sales jobs you've had before being an SDR probably weren't formal or fair. When I say formal, they weren't as complicated of a B2B sales as something as like a B2B SaaS deal is. If you're asking for $1,000 to $5,000 in MRR a month, that's different than selling cars or working at Nordstrom or, doing the B2C stuff. And even like, there's like some telemarketing style, like where it's technically B2B, but it's still very transactional. Like even the SMB level stuff, very, very different. And so it's difficult to understand what kind of buyer you have, like where they're at in recognition of their problem. A lot of the front third of a sequence is typically, like you said, aimed at people in market now, low-hanging fruit buyers, whereas you have to be able to have sequence awareness. Where in the sequence are you, and really what type of person is email number 8, 9, and 10 aimed at? It's not going to be anybody that's near in market, right? If I'm in market, unless you're me, who is in market evaluating and buying, like we talked about last week, and still doesn't respond to your email, I'm one of those enigmas, I guess. But the message that you send to somebody on 7, 8, and 9 is a different person entirely in your pipeline than someone who would respond on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So keep that in mind. And I think, and like I said, if I reshare your rewrite, what I like about it is that it's so well written that, you could really, with some, obviously some tweaks in the CTA or whatever, you could put this almost anywhere in the sequence. Because when I think about a sequence, I like to go, hey, I'll send a message or two that's pretty low hanging fruitish. But email 3 might be somebody that's like, it might be way, way further back as somebody in the pipeline, just because you never know. Because if you can hit somebody that's much earlier stage and not quite as in market earlier in the pipeline, all the better. I'd rather, for me, at least especially in the enterprise space, it gets more complicated. You want to just build relationships and get in the club, right? You want to be a part of the marketplace. especially if you're selling to Fortune 2000 and up, you've got to be in the club and in the market, in the community, right? So any meeting, any interaction that you can leave, and Grayson does a really good job at this in his rewrites, is that every email is written with the idea to not offend them, to not close future doors, because it's obvious Grayson's a practitioner and really knows what he's doing a lot, because he has, his eye is always forward looking. People who are short-sighted are either new or they've always been in transactional environments or whatever. Like if you're in B2B at all, you know that most of your sales, most of the people you talk to today don't actually close for months, sometimes years in the future. So that's why, personally, from a philosophical standpoint, I'm not opposed to like breakup emails, at least in the sense that, okay, hey, I'm letting you know I'm not going to continue pestering you. But in a sense, in the, like where this one was written as like, hey, kind of close the door to future opportunity, I'm very much opposed to. Like, don't close the file. The files, we all know you got a CRM. Everybody does. I'm in there. I know I'm in there. You're not closing my file.
Don't close the file. I love it. That's the quote of this episode. Cool. Okay, so I do think we're at the top of the hour. So for those of us who joined us today, thank you so much. We'll see you next week, same time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. One more thing, we do have an event that we're planning over at SDRev called Steal These Ideas, which is going to be a great showcase event that allows people to submit some of their top outbound prospecting tactics or approaches that are really working for them. We're going to kind of gather those submissions, review them with a panel of expert judges, and kind of go through some advice and tips on how to get results today and going into 2021 for outbound sellers. Other than that, make sure to subscribe. And if you do have an email of your own that you would like Austin and I to review live on this show, please send it to us, connect to us on LinkedIn, comment below on this video, and we'll get in touch with you. You can even join us on the air to go over the email and discuss. So we'd love to have you.
Yeah, please join. Appreciate everyone joining. We will be back next week, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, right here on SD Revolution's YouTube channel.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good morning.